Buchem Abayim to the sixth, I believe it's the sixth, shiur in the series of lectures of shiurim, the oral tradition of the written law. So in the first five shiurim, the first five lectures, we've laid a little bit the basis for understanding Chazal's understanding of the chumash and the composition and construction of the text of the chumash as being something which Chazal understood to be commensurable to the structure and the construction of the oral law itself. And we saw, in fact, actually, that all the elements of the oral law Chazal saw within the text of the chumash itself. I mean, I'm operating from Chazal's point of view. It could very well be, and probably was, that actually Chazal's construction or Chazal's creating the structure of the oral law was in fact based itself on the chumash, and this is in a certain sense a testament to the authenticity of the tradition of the oral law, having actually viewed itself as being a continuation of the written law itself. In any case, having spoken in general terms over the last five shiurim, the previous five shiurim, this shiur, number 6, we're going to actually go into detail into several topics, several subjects, and we're trying to in fact, illustrate how actually a lot of the axioms and concepts that we've developed over the course of the last five shiurim can be applied in understanding actually specific topics which arise in the chumash itself, and which in fact actually have been the subject of much discussion. That discussion, which I'm putting in quotation marks, will maybe leave for another time, but in any case, Hamevin Yovin, that in fact these issues and topics have been in fact debated and held under much scrutiny, both by the traditional Mefarshim and by the so acclaimed scholars of the text of the Pentateuch. In any case, we're going to speak now about the Korban Pesach. And the reason I chose the Korban Pesach is because the Korban Pesach, in fact, actually is a topic both in the written and the oral law, the Torah Shebachsav and the Torah Shebi'al Peh, which actually appears many places in the Chumash. Probably appears more in the Chumash than any other mitzvah in the Torah. And therefore, it appears in different parts of the Chumash, and it's really worthwhile for us to actually go into it and try to understand it in detail, and given the fact that much ink has really been spilled on this topic. Now, where does the Korban Pesach appear? Well, it appears just about everywhere. It appears in Shemot, in Perek Yud Beis, in Shemot, after HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, HaChodesh Hazeh Lechem Rosh Chodashim, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu proceeds to command Moshe Rabbeinu on the Korban Pesach, right? Dabru al kol atas Yisrael leimor be'esol HaChodesh Hazeh v'yichol lahem ish se leveis avos se laboyos. And then it speaks about the dam that goes on the Shtei HaMezuzos, and of course after that it says v'achlos habasa b'layla hazeh tzli eish umatzos amorim yechlu. Okay, so therefore the Korban Pesach has to be eaten b'tzli, and of course it has to be taken from a seh, right? And of course the pasuk goes on to say, this is pasuk tes, al toichlu b'meno na uvashu vushel b'moyim, right? There's a prohibition of eating the Korban Pesach cooked. It has to be roasted, ki im tzli eish roish al k'lov al kilboy, and then let's do mena ad boiker, okay? And it specifies how the Korban Pesach has to be eaten. And finally, it speaks about the Yontif of Pesach, the Isra of eating chametz, and then in the next parsha, the parsha Psucha, the next parsha Pasuk Chafala, also it speaks about the Mishchu Chulachem Tzoyin Mishpachseichem V'Shachtu HaPasach. So once again, the Korban Pesach has to be taken from the tzoyin, and speaks about the sprinkling of the dam, of the blood. Okay, and And then it speaks about Vayok Yisrael ha'oretz asher yitzal Hashem lachem kasher diber u'shmat avodah zos. That this avodah has to perform in all coming generations. So therefore, we have these two parshas which speak in detail about the Korban Pesach, in much detail about the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is mentioned actually again in Shmos. It's mentioned in Parshas Mishpatim. In Parshas Mishpatim, when the Torah speaks about the Yom Tov at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. So there's in addition to the it says in Parachav Gimel Pasuk Tezvav es Chag HaMatzos Tishmor, and then at the very end of the commandments of the Yom Tovim. In Pasuk Yud Ches, this is also once again still in Parachav Gimel. Lo yisbach al chometz dam zivchi, v'lo yolin chelu chag yad boika. Okay, that's in Parshas Mishpatim. That's in Parshas Mishpatim, and that's the and then after that the Torah speaks about the bris. At the very end of Parshas Mishpatim, the bris that Kodesh Baruch Hu was kairos with Klal with Bnei Yisrael, and there's a Kasadam, Sefer Bris, v'chuli, etc. Then, at the very end of Parashat Kisisa, right? Once again, after the Chet HaEgel, Kodesh Baruch Hu pardons Klal Yisrael. Then, once again, there's a commandment of the Yom Tovim again. And towards the very end of the command of Yom Tovim, it speaks about, it says, this is Perek Lamed Dalet, Pasuk Chaf Hei, Lo yisishchat al chometz dam zivchi v'lo yin la boika zevach chag HaPesach. So once again, there's another command to the Korban Pesach. Okay, now there are two places in the Torah which the Torah also speaks about Pesach. One is of course, in Parshas Emor, right, and one is in Bamidbar. I'm not going to go into those two places in the Chumash because
Pesach Sheni.
Right, in Achanami. No, but also too in the Karbonis, in Parshas Pinchas. In Parshas Pinchas, the Torah speaks about the list of Karbonos, the different Yom Tovim. The Torah speaks about that. We're not going to go into that right now. We have many miles to go before we sleep. Okay, but already we've counted. I think already 7 places. But the main other place where the Torah speaks about the Korban Pesach is the fact actually in Devarim. In Devarim, Parshas Re'eh, right, and there in Perek Tezayin, Pasuk Aleph, right? Shemot Chodesh Ha'oviv Yasisa Pesach LaHashem Elokecha Ki v'Chodesh Ha'oviv Yitzia Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim Loila. And then it says, "V'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha Tzoi Nuvokim Bokim Asher Yivcha Hashem L'Shakin Shmaysham," right? And then there's the issue of bringing the Korban Pesach, except in the Beis Hamikdash. Then in Pasuk Zayin, once again, still in Perek Tezayin, Uvishalta v'yachalta b'mokem hashivcha Hashem l'kecha boy. Okay, now, I want to start right away with noting that there's a fundamental contradiction, in the pesukim, between the initial tzivah, the first place where we see that there's a tzivah of the Korban Pesach, namely in Shmos. In Shmos, in the first 2 parshas where we have the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, so the Torah is very, very explicit that the Korban Pesach has to come min hakavos min ha'is, has to come from tzayin, right? Shepsela, right? Has to come from tzayin, and also has to be tzli. That's clear. In fact, there's an issur, there's a explicit issur of bishul, of cooking the Korban Pesach, right? Ad kedei kach that there's a sugyas aruchos in Pesachim that even if a Korban Pesach which has been cooked, in fact, actually, is considered to be an issur, and there's bittul and taroives, etc., with regard to any Korban Pesach which has been cooked. But in addition to that, however, in Parshas Re'eh, we have a almost what seems to be the mitzvah has, in a certain sense, expressed quite differently. First of all, once again, we're in Perek Tezayin, Pasuk Beis, in Parshas Re'eh. V'zavachta Pesach l'Hashem Elokecha, Tzoinu V'okar. Already, the Korban Pesach can be brought from bakar. From bakar. And then, in addition to that, it says in Pasuk Zayin, right? Uvishalta v'yochalta b'mokem asher yivcha Hashem lokecha bay. The Korban Pesach, we see here, there's the Torah says to cook it. It's a bishul. So we have a fundamental contradiction, certainly, at least a distinction, a very pronounced distinction between the prescription of the Korban Pesach in Parshas Boy, where the Korban Pesach has to come from Tzoyin and has to be tzli, and between the Korban Pesach in Devarim, where in fact actually the Torah specifies Tzoyin uvaka, and also Bishul. Okay, that's a fundamental distinction. Now, of course, it's clear to Chazal, that in fact actually the Korban Pesach, right, can only come from Tzoyin, and this is in Chazal in many places. I'm going to just quote that there's a very long mechilta in Parshas Boy, Parsha Dalet, and in Parsha Dalet, I guess I call it, Perek Dalet or Halacha Dalet, and there are many drashas of Chazal, proving the fact that the Pesach has to come from the Sovim and Mina Izim, right? And not from Boka. And Chazal learn that the Boka that's being referred to in Devarim is actually for the Chagiga, right? There's a Chagiga Yudalit, right? Which is brought with the Korban Pesach. We'll discuss that another time. But in fact, we see in the Milchilta many drashas from several Tanoim, right? Proving in different ways, in fact, actually, that the Korban Pesach has to be brought only from Tzoyin and not from Boka, and that the Boka that's being referred to in Devarim is referring to the Chagiga, and that's what Rashi learns actually in Devarim too. As regards to Ubishalta, the Mechilta also, in fact, actually learns in Parshas Boy that actually this Bishul refers actually to Tzli. That in fact, actually, Tzli is also called Bishul. And in fact, one of the rayas to this is actually a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, which speaks about the Pesach of Yoshiyahu. So there in Divrei Hayamim, Beis, it's Perek Lamed Hey. So there it says there the lashon, the lashon. It says and there, one second, there the lashon is one second. I'm sorry, right? Well, it says V'yashyo b'yishon Pesach l'Hashem, right? And it says right. It says in Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayivashlo haPesach ba'esh kamishpat, ba'esh kamishpat. So you use both bishul ba'esh. So I believe I saw it in Rabbi Tzvi Hoffman in his parish on Devarim. There he writes that bishul is a general term, which means to prepare by fire. In other words, it brings a raya here from the from Divrei Yomim that bishul is not necessarily cooking. Bishul can refer to tzli too, and that's how we learn Vivashlo HaPesach Ba'esh Kamishpa. In other words, basically that bishul is just a general term that refers to preparing something with heat. But what I want to focus a little bit more is that, so there, in the case of bishul, we see, I think, one can understand that at least Chazal understood that bishul referred to Eish too. And that's how the Lashon of the Mechilta. That tzli is also called bishul. That's a matter of expression. But the fact is that we see that in Chazal, that it was clear that the Korban Pesach should come only from Tzoyin and not from Boka. Okay? However, this is in spite of the fact that the Mishnah, at the end, I think, of the the ninth parak of Pesachim, right, lists differences, right, between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Deiros. In other words, there's not an agenda of Chazal to equate everything in Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Deiros. For example, the Mishnah says that the Pesach Mitzrayim, the Mekach, the taking of the Korban, was from the Asiri, from the 10th, right? And in fact, actually, this is a explicit Mechilta. The Mechilta, I'm quoting from the Mechilta in Yud Beis. It says, I'm sorry, Parsha Hey, I guess Perek Yud Beis, or Parsha Hey, Halacha Yud Beis. In the Mechilta says, V'holach Mishmeres, it says, L'hoitzi Pesach Doirish, Pesach Mitzrayim Mechel Be'esor, U Pesach Doirish Mechel Kol Zman. So Chazal are making a distinction between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Doirish. So it's not that there's a conspiracy and agenda of Chazal to basically whitewash discrepancies in the chumash by saying, well, it can't be that Pesach Mitzrayim is in Pesach Doirish, because we see the Chazal say explicitly, and learn actually explicitly, a medai from a pasuk, that Pesach Mitzrayim can be distinguished from Pesach Doirish. So the question is, what did Chazal see in the chumash? Right? What did Chazal see in the chumash which necessitated the way they learned that Pesach Mitzrayim, that Pesach Doirish also has to be min hatzoyin v'loy min abaka. In other words, from sheep and not from cattle. I think that's the proper English expression to be used. So it is true that if a person looks at the Mechilta, and this is the Mechilta in Parsha Daled, Halacha Daled, so the Mechilta there brings a list of drashas, right? There's a drasha of Eliezer, there's a drasha of Rabbi Yoshaya, there's a drasha of Rabbi Nosson, there's a drasha of Rabbi Eliezer, there's a drasha of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, we see a list of drashas, different types of limudim of Chazal. There's a drasha of Rabbi Akiva, drasha of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel agree on this. There's a list of drashas and everybody seems to be adding their own drasha, right, learning in their own specific way, while in fact Pesach Doirish also can only come from min haksovim min ha'izim. And I don't want to use this expression, but the amount of drashas here, darshuni. In other words, why did Chazal feel the need to list so many different types of drashas? A dogma, an example of this, is we see in several places. For example, we see, in Menachos, in Sabach Vav, Mimochas HaShabbos, and we know that there was a famous vikuach, a debate between Chazal and between the Tzdukim, whether, or the Minim, right, whether Shabbos day refers to the first day of Pesach, or whether it refers to Shabbos Bereishis. And we see that there Chazal bring a whole list of drashas until the Gemara, I think at the end, the Gemara says, the Gemara decides which drasha is the best type of a drasha. It's an entire sugya in Menachos Amar Vav. And clearly there, we see that the Stukim were arguing, and for this reason perhaps, in fact, Chazal felt the need to bring many drashas. So, but the very fact that there are so many drashas leads me to assume, and this is the hypothesis or assumption I'm going to be making, that there seems to have been an overarching reason, besides the drashas. I mean, of course, these are drashas of Chazal, but there seems to be an overarching understanding or reason, right, why in fact actually Chazal understood fundamentally the chumash. And I'm speaking about the pshat of the chumash. Pshat l'chud and drash l'chud. Why the pshat in the chumash clearly suggests that the Korban Pesach has to be brought not from tzoyin and not from baka. Just like how I understand mimochas haShabbos, that there must have been something fundamental in the text of the chumash, in the pshat of the chumash, or how Chazal understood the text of the chumash, why that the Shabbos mentioned in Parshas Emor has to be referring to the first day of Pesach and not to Shabbos Bereishis. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have the Ramban al chumash. So the Ramban al chumash, in this pasuk, where the Ramban speaks about this issue. Speaks about a derech agav. I want to read the Ramban once again. It says in this word once again. We're in Devarim, Parshas Re'eh. That's Perek Tezayin. Shemot is pasuk Aleph. Shemot is chodesh ha'aviv. Asisa Pesach LaHashem Elokecha. Ki b'chodesh ha'aviv Yitziach Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim Loila. Okay, and here, that's the first pasuk. Then pasuk Beis. This is the pasuk that's we're focusing on. V'zovachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha Tzoy Nuvoka. B'mokem Hashiyivcha Hashem L'shakin Shemoi Sham. Okay, let me read from the Ramban. Says the Ramban, V'tam V'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha Tzoy Nuvoka. Tam means I'm going to teach you how to learn the pasuk, says the Ramban. Al derech hapshat, k'mosho aseh kesofim, right? Reuven, Shimon, v'Levi, right? Okay. V'omar v'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha v'tzoyin ubaka. No, this is this thing. V'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha v'tzoyin v'baka, and also tzoyin and baka. L'chach le'omar v'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha min hatzoyin u'min habaka. The Ramban makes a diuk. It says v'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha tzoyin uvaka. If the Torah was coming to tell me from which we're supposed to take the Korban Pesach, it should have said min hatzoyin u'min habaka. Asher yema b'chol makom, which is said in every place. Min habaka min hatzoyin takrivas korban. I mean, because he brings rayas, min hatzoyin korban, min habaka makriv, he brings rayas. Aber yitzava bekan bepesach, v'hu aseh sheyizkir kavar. So it says the Torah, aber yitzava bekan bepesach, the Torah will command the Pesach, v'hu aseh sheyizkir kavar. That's the say that's already been mentioned. And then it says, v'tzoynu boka elim v'izim u'bnei boka l'chug ha'chagiga b'yom hazeh. Now, the Ramban is actually making an interesting diuk. I mean, the further Ramban is coming to tell us that v'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha, but it says, but the Ramban says v'zavachta Pesach LaHashem. The Pesach, right, is referring to something previous in the chumash. V'zavachta Pesach. In other words, it doesn't tell me what the Korban Pesach is. V'zavachta Pesach implies the Pesach that I've already spoken about. That's what Ramban is saying. Now, what's interesting is that in Shemot, when the Torah speaks about the Korban Pesach, right? So beginning in Perek Yud Beis, and the Torah we have the first shiur with the Korban Pesach, right? So there, the Torah says, "V'kocha toichlu oisoy masnechem chalguim na'alechem b'raglechem ma'kelchem b'yedchem." You should eat it, right? Right, and you have to have your staffs and your shoes on. V'achalta matzeh b'chipozon Pesach hu LaHashem. The other Torah says this is the Pesach LaHashem. That's in Shemot, in Perek Yud, in the first parsha, and also too in the next parsha, which follows right after that. There's a parsha Psucha follows right after that. Beginning with, once again, in Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Chafala, Vayikra Moshe l'chol ziknei Yisrael v'yom aleihem. And there it says, V'yamartem zevach Pesach hu. It was the Torah saying, this is the Pesach. This is the Korban Pesach. In other words, Behei Yediyah. This is the Korban Pesach. So, in Devarim, it says, V'zavachta Pesach LaHashem. What's the Pesach? So clearly, the Torah, the chumash, is referring to the Pesach that was previously mentioned, that was defined as being the Pesach, the Korban Pesach Behei Yediyah. In other words, Devarim is clearly referring to Shemot. That's, in my opinion, the pshat of the Ramban. It's my pshat of the Ramban. That's the pshat of the Ramban. So Devarim is coming a little bit, Ramban is saying explicitly, as a perush, as a commentary, right, on Shemot.
This is not in Divrei Chazal anyway.
No, the Ramban says al pi pshat.
Why isn't Shmos a perush on Devarim?
What?
It sounds more like Shmos is a perush on Devarim.
No.
Something pashut.
No. You're operating like mathematics. It's different. I've already told you what the Korban Pesach is in Shemot. This is the Korban Pesach. And now it says Devarim, when you come to the base of Mikdash, you'll sacrifice, you'll bring the Korban, you'll bring the Pesach. What is the Pesach? And I spoke to you about it in Shemot. That's what we're referring to. Okay? So like this. So, I want to claim that Chazal understood clearly in the Chumash that Devarim, like as we spoke about, I think in the 5th lecture, as the Ramban learns, that Devarim in fact actually is a perush on Shemot, just as the Gemara is a perush on the Mishnah.
It's not. Do we have evidence?
Or a drasha, what?
It's not Chazal. That's Ramban saying learning like this.
The Ramban is saying this is the pshat.
It's not Chazal saying this. We haven't yet found Chazal saying that.
No. Well, Chazal. Well, no. Actually, Chazal spoke to speak about the Mishnah Torah.
So far in the shiur today, you said Ramban. Ramban says that Devarim is the perush on Shemot.
Yeah, Ramban says that in Devarim. Yeah, well, Ramban understands that that's what Chazal mean by saying the Mishnah Torah. Or Chazal say for example, but we see that we spoke about it. For example, we brought the Chazal, we brought the Gemara Hani Nashim Hoil v'Yitza. The Gemara says a Chafel with Beis and Brachas Hani Nashim Hoil v'Yitza b'Shmir Yitza b'Schira. So the Ramban understood that basically that Shoma Yom Shabbos HaKadosh is a perush is coming to tell me what Schira is. In other words, Chazal clearly understood the way Chazal operated. Chazal operated with the assumption that the Devarim is coming to say pshat, to tell me the pshat in Shemot. That was the shiur.
But it's odd that here nowhere does Chazal give.
No. Here that's a Ramban and Triebitz is taking the Ramban. Yeah.
The Ramban is pashut pshat like the Ramban.
Okay, fine. Okay, so like this. Now, I want to say is that maybe this is a little bit. We can understand the Gemara in Menachos in Samach Vav. It says Mimochas HaShabbos. What's Mimochas HaShabbos? I mean, Shabbos we know. Shabbos Ul Hashem. What's HaShabbos? HaShabbos is Shabbos I've been speaking about. Which Shabbos I've been speaking about in this parasha? Clearly it's what? It's Pesach. In other words, the underlying understanding of Chazal was that when the Torah said, "V'zavachta Pesach," right, was referring to a Pesach somewhere else. Now, where somewhere else? Well, where does the Torah say this is the Pesach? The Torah says that in Shemot. In Shemot, clearly the Torah says it's supposed to be tzli, and there's an Isra bringing a Bavushal. So clearly, the pasuk in Devarim is a perush on Shemot. And I want to claim that's Mimochas HaShabbos. What's HaShabbos? These Shabbos I've been speaking about, not Stam Shabbos. When Torah says Shabbos, Beit HaZikor says Stam Shabbos. Shabbos right? What's HaShabbos? The Shabbos I've been speaking, a specific Shabbos I've been speaking about. What Shabbos is that? That can't be Stam Shabbos Bereishis. In that parasha, in Emor, it's referring to what? It's referring to Pesach. Look at the Meshech Chochmah speaks about why Taka Pesach is called Shabbos. But then the important thing is, that's where Chazal, I use Shiva's expression, that's where Chazal are coming from. But are not going to say this explicitly. Chazal are going to bring drashas. So just like in Menachos, Chazal bring all different types of drashas. But the underlying is really, they understood that Teresh Versav is a type of a Teresh B'Yalpeh. So here too, in the Mechilta, even though Chazal are giving a Darsheni, in other words, a ribuy of drashas, but the basic understanding, what the underlying understanding of Chazal, which forces me to understand that the Pesach can only come from Tzoyin and not from Baka, is the way we've spoken above. Now, what's interesting is that if this is true, why didn't Chazal say it? Why bring drashas? Why bring drashas? So to that I want to give two answers. First answer is, I want to answer based upon what the Rambam says in the Hakdamah to the Perusha Mishnayos. The Rambam says, for example, it says in the Torah, Pri Eitz Hada. Chachta b'Yemerisha, Pri Eitz Hada, Kapis T'Barim. Pri Eitz Hada, says the Rambam, is an esrog. And that's clearly Mina Perushim HaMukubalim. Says the Rambam, no one in the history of Judaism, since Matan Torah, has ever argued that a Pri Eitz Hada is not an esrog. So if that's true, what's the Gemara doing in Sukkot? Masechah Sukkot is the third parak, bringing all different types of drashas. Why is Pri Eitz referred to esrog? So the Rambam says that Chazal wanted to show it how it actually is mashma, how it comes from the actual lashon of the chumash itself. But for sure, this was a Kabbalah, says the Rambam. I want to say, in a very parallel fashion, the same thing here too. In other words, for sure Chazal, when they read the Chumash, they understood that Devarim was a perish on Shemot. The purpose of the drashas, of the Mechilta, is to show how, in fact, actually, I can derive that Abiderach Hadro. In other words, through the Yugim Amidas. Shatayah the drashas by him. That's what I want to claim what Chazal are doing. Why is that true? Okay, that's another issue, but then that's clear what's going on. Now, you could be, a second thing too is that, you ask me, where do Chazal say that it's a Gemara? They don't say it anywhere, but we see it's a working principle. Hananashim, hoil b'shmira, v'isteo b'shmira, isteo b'schira. In other words, it was a working principle of Chazal. You know what Chazal understood? A working principle is not meant explicit.
It's an axiom.
Right, that's the way they work. That's the way they work. When a person makes a logical argument, it doesn't give you an introduction to the theory of logic. It just works logically, usually. Today, a little bit less so, but in any case, this was a working principle of Chazal. A working principle is not something that they had to make explicit. It's clearly a working principle. So I want to claim here it's a working principle. That's an important thing. Now, the fact is that what I'm saying here is actually more important, in my opinion, more important than just for what I'm saying. Because there's, as I said before, much ink has been spilt upon this issue. I'm not to be mala now al Shulchan HaTorah, what people have said about this. Maybe another time.
When the camera's off.
Right. But in any case, we see clearly that Chazal understood fundamentally, and this is that not only, in a conceptual sense, lishma, but they worked with this assumption. Now, what's interesting is that I mentioned that there are other two places too in Shemot where also the Korban Pesach is mentioned. One is in Parshas Mishpatim, right? And there it says, Perach of Gimel Pasuk Yud Ches. I mentioned the pasuk Lo Yisizbach al Chometz Dam Zivchi V'lo Yolen Chelev Chagi Ad Boiker. What's Chelev Chagi? What's that referring to? And in addition, at the end of Parshas, what?
Can't be the Chagiga because
No. That's it's referring to the Korban Pesach, right? Right. And in addition, it says in Perek Lamed Dalet Pasuk Chafei. This is in Parshas Kisisa, right? Lo yisishchat al chometz dam zivchi v'lo yolin laboiken zeva chag haPesach. Okay. Now in Pasuk Chafei, clearly the Torah is referring to the Korban Pesach, right? Lo tishchat al chometz dam zivchi, right? V'lo yol laboik hazeh v'chag Pesach, and also Pasuk again, Lo sizbach al chometz dam zivchi, v'lo yolin chelev chag yad boiker. Now, I mean, what's chelev chagi? What's dam zivchi? Now, we have the same issur in Parak Lamed Dalet. Lo tishkal al chometz dam zivchi, lo yolin laboik hazeh v'chag Pesach. We'll discuss this in detail, maybe in the next year. But here we have also an example. In other words, what's dam zivchi? Dam zivchi is referred to as zevch I already spoke about. Also, too, dam zivchi, yolin chelev chagi. Clearly, in Shmos, in Mishpatim, the Torah is referring to a chag that already spoke about. What chag is that? That chag is clearly Chag Pesach. The pasuk is divided into two parts. We'll speak about that in Yitz Hashem. Because there are many interesting dinim we see in Chazal, which actually have their root in the structure of the pesukim. But we see that even in Shmos, in Mishpatim, we have a reference to a chag, dam zivchi, right? Okay? That, in fact, clearly the Torah must have spoken about, for this to make sense, it's referring to something that Torah has already spoken about. And what is that? Parshas, that's the Korban Pesach. Zeva Pesachu, Pesachu. The Pesach is spoken about in Shemot. And it's very, very important. Because we see that maybe we can understand that actually Shemot too is acting a little bit as a perush of what was said by Yetzias Mitzrayim. Which is very, very important, which we'll speak about in Yitz Hashem in another shiur, because this is actually much more of a complicated issue. In any case, we're going to conclude over here that we see clearly that the background to the drashas of Chazal, we didn't even go into detailed drashas of Chazal, maybe we'll speak about that another time too. The background of drashas of Chazal was a working principle that the Torah Shebechsav is structured in the same way as the Torah Sheba'al-Peh, which is what we're referring to as the oral tradition of the written law. In any case, from an undisclosed place in Yerushalayim Kodesh, until next week, Kol Tov.